Hello, everybody. We have one of my favorite people here today. I'm so excited to share with you Heather Gray, who is a mindset coach, and not only a mindset coach, but the mindset coach in my world. So she's here to give us a complete mindset shift when it comes to sales and our business. So Heather, welcome to the show.
Katie, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. And I think your show is just incredible. And what you're doing in offering people such quick, specific, actionable tips to get them out of their own way and on with it, I think is really helpful too. You're already helping people with mindset just by making it so easy and accessible. I'm really impressed with everything you've been doing on the show.
That is why I think you're the perfect fit, because like everyone thinks like, oh, it's just practical tactical, and I'm like, it's the two pieces, right? Like you can't just sit there and mindset yourself into a successful business, just like you can't like practical action yourself and create a business that is right for you, right? It's the yin and yang of everything.
You need the strategy with the purpose and the intention and knowing who you are and how you move through the world as a business owner, because I think what ends up happening is otherwise you just keep focusing on strategy, strategy, strategy. But if you're it's like putting on someone else's clothes. If it's not quite your size and it doesn't fit right and it's not your style, you're never going to gel with sales and you're never going to gel with copy. But if you start to know who you are and how you move through the world and what it is you uniquely offer to the world, then it starts to fit and selling becomes way easier.
Totally. And I mean, being someone who's very short, I can tell you I can't put on anybody else's clothes and have it fit.
And how great does it feel when you're in something that's been tailored, or something has just been added a hem to it, or it's just been brought in right where you need it to be brought in. You kind of carry yourself a little bit differently, you hold yourself a little bit taller, and you feel more connected. I think that's what the challenge is for business owners to do in their sales copy is what do you need to do to set yourself up for success so you can feel super proud of yourself in the offering you're putting out there without having to apologize for it and without having to play small or kind of hide in the corner. It's like the person who wears the red dress to a party and then puts the black blazer over it. It's if you're going to wear the red dress, like take the jacket off and show the world who you are.
That is so it. And I mean, how many times have you met someone and they're sort of like feeling stuck in their business, and it's because like, you ask to see their website and they have this website shame and they're like, I don't want to show you. And it's like, of course, like if they're scared to show your coach, they're scared to talk about it, put it themselves out there for their future customers because maybe their offering is off. They follow somebody who said you have to do it like this, and they built something that didn't work for them. Or maybe their whole website, like I was saying, it doesn't fit them. They're not wearing the red dress yet, even.
And I think I see that a lot, actually, Katie. The website thing is an interesting piece because I think for some people, they put all of their focus and all of their energy on it and they don't move beyond their website because they think it's the be all and end all. So they spend all this time tinkering and moving this headline and changing this word and changing the picture rather than sort of saying, like, this website just has to introduce people to me. This website just has to help people get to know me. And they're not going to get to know me with the perfectly placed headline with the perfectly matched color. They are going to get to know me if I'm showing up in the copy, if I'm showing up in the messaging. But you're also talking to somebody who just had a website redo and makeover, because I was one of the other kind of people who decided because I was showing up in all the places and doing all the things, I didn't need to pay attention to my website. And then I looked at it critically in Q4 of 2018, and I realized that my website was so 2 years ago, that it wasn't representing at all who I was, the work I was doing, or how I was showing up. And I really needed to reintroduce myself to my audience. And I had to find my new dress because the old one didn't fit anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And also, I think that it's really interesting how not only did your your business change, but also you really created a whole like you're just busting the coaching idea, the coaching world open with your new service.
Yes, yes.
Which I think is a great lesson for people to talk about. I don't want to harp on it too much, but the fact that I think people can learn a lot of lessons from this, that you don't have to do things the exact same way that everybody else is doing it. Can you tell me a little bit about your new amazing service? Because it's completely inspired me and I'm loving it.
Yeah, so absolutely. So part of the root of this is I always tell people what I want them to think. And so in sharing this story, it's really important to me that your listeners recognize that this is a story about self-acceptance and knowing who you are and owning that. And one of the things that happened when I entered the online space is I was telling everybody that I was a trained therapist, because I am a trained therapist. I had a brick and mortar private therapy practice for 10 years, and I have my master's degree. I'm 20 plus years experience. And I was telling people that. And a lot of the feedback I got in the online business space was, oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be shoving your experience down people's throats. You don't want to be showing up as somebody high on the mountain. You need to be relatable to people and approachable to people, and they just need to know that you can help them. They don't care how you can help them. So for 2 years, I think I was in kind of a dress that didn't fit very well, because I was doing the packages. I had like the shiny 3-month package and the super shiny, sassy, high-end, high-touch, high-performing 6N package, a 6-month package. And at the end of the day, it was someone else's version of what they thought a coaching business should be, rather than what I thought my coaching business should be. And one of the things that I hated when I was a therapist, and one of the reasons why I moved from therapy to coaching, is that I wanted to be able to help people in the moment. That I didn't like the idea that I was blocked into these session hours. I'd help people from 11 to 12. They would feel better because they talked about their problems, but then they'd have to go and do the hard thing 2 days later. And they'd have to say, well, what was it Heather said and how exactly did that go? And when I entered the online space, I kind of forgot that that was one of the things that made me leave the therapy space. And instead, I bought into coaching packages. And in looking at my website and looking at the work I was doing with people, I realized that the work that really makes a difference is when I coached on demand. So I created this coaching offering that was usually originally started out as an addendum to my coaching practices, where I would work for people one-on-one on a call, and then I would do follow-up through Voxer, which is a voice messaging app. So it kind of serves as like your virtual walkie-talkie. People can talk into it, they can leave a voice message, and then I can answer them. And through doing coaching on demand, through like people having a question, sort of saying like, okay, Heather, I know we just talked about this, but now I'm about to make this huge, hairy, scary decision. I don't quite know how to do it. I can then respond in real time and answer that question, get them out of indecision and doubt all the faster, and get them out of their head and on with it. And so when I realized, sort of doing this on repeat, that it was really working and gelling and creating like fabulous change for people, I just decided to own it, and I built an entire coaching package of just simply coaching on demand, working with people Monday through Friday through the voice messaging app, with the idea that when they have a question within my business hours, I'm going to answer them. They're going to get stuck, and I'm going to get them out of their way, so they're not sitting in that stuck for 6 days. And it's changed the face of what coaching can be. I think it's changed the face of sort of what building an online business can be, because we really do get to do it our own way. We just have to listen to ourselves first.
And also listening to your customers and just sort of watching it, because if you'd asked them, they probably wouldn't have said, like if you just said, what do you want? And then, you know, they wouldn't have said Voxer coaching, because it wasn't a thing.
Right.
Like it just was not a thing. But when you started testing it and seeing the results, that's when you're like, oh my goodness, this is magic. Because it's true. Like we talked to a coach, and then you have to go do the things for 6 days, and you are just at a loss. And you kind of tread water and waste that whole freaking week, because you're like, I don't actually know how to say it this way or whatever I do. Now you're actually getting results so quickly. And that's amazing and completely different than anything I've ever came across in the coaching world.
And I think that part of it is that's the challenge for business owners, to be, how do we get to a place of being unapologetic about where our zone of genius is and where our expertise is? because I think what ends up, sort of being really tempting is to just follow the pack. If we see somebody living the life we think we want and running the business we think we want, it's like, oh, I'm just going to go do it like them. I'm just going to, replicate that strategy and do that, sort of way of moving through the world because I want those results, when you realize you never get there because you're just not that person. And that's what I ended up learning. Now, when you go to my website, you see that I've identified on the website that I have my master's degree. I am a professional. I don't speak in emojis, so I've stopped speaking in emojis. That's not who I am. So even though people said, break up your, I can't even remember when somebody started telling me that, in my messaging to people, I needed to add more color and flair, and I had to emoji the crap out of things. But,
if it's not you, it's not you.
It's not me. It's not how I move through the world. That I own that I'm a professional. I own that, I have some years on me. I've been in the field for a while. I don't need to speak millennial speak or whatever it is that people are trying to get me to do. But it's really, Katie, it's really scary. That's the piece that I think where, I imagine a lot of your clients get stuck is if they own who they are and how they want to run their business and how they want to put out their product and offering, and they don't see anyone else doing it that way, you do feel like you're out on a limb because you don't get the kickback until you're like, wow, people liked that. People connected with it. People resonated with it. And that's when I think it really gets exciting for folks.
That is. And it's that scary point, I think, that people get stuck where it's like, first of all, can I take the risk? And is it possible? Can I? And is it possible? And it's only when you actually do it, and you need to put yourself in, you need to bridge that mindset gap of where you allow yourself to do it.
Mm-hmm. And to give yourself permission.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I think, is one of the hardest pieces.
Well, and I think that one of the things too is that it's what do we do when we don't have experience because we haven't done it this way. So one of the things that I often tell people in this is that it would be easy for me to create a story. And I did initially, Katie, I initially did say I abandoned my professional ideals. Now, not only am I not doing therapy, I'm doing this whole virtuing coaching thing. And now I'm not even doing a scheduled call. I'm just doing my work through a Voxer walkie-talkie. It's so easy to just push yourself down. And I think the challenge is to say, but what's possible if I just give myself permission to do it differently? Because the reality is if it doesn't work, we're capable of changing. If people don't resonate with it, we're capable of shifting to something that they'll resonate more with. Or we just take the chance and be willing to see what happens, to be curious and leaning into curiosity rather than feeling like we need the guaranteed outcome before we move.
Because there's no guaranteed outcome anyway. And
Ever.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you were talking about being flexible and stuff, because that is something that I try and teach people. I think it's so important that people set themselves into these really rigid, I must launch like this, I must do this, I must have that package. And it's no, you can break that away. You can experiment with it. And one of the words that you used was easy. So do you think that played into it all, whether you thought this was too easy for it to work?
I definitely think it was that. For me, it was really letting go of what the right way to do it is. And I think sometimes when it is easy for us and I don't have to think about it. One of the things I remember when we were talking before we got on the mic, I do this coaching when I'm walking the beach in Southern California. That kind of makes me sound like a jerk, right?
You're so not that person.
Right? I'm just people on Voxer are hearing the waves crash in the background as I'm talking. How obnoxious is that? And
or they're like, oh my gosh, she's so good. She put this backing track in there to make me feel calm. And
right now, creating Zen. So it feels like, how do I take myself seriously? Because it doesn't sound serious until it's, I'm getting to live the life I want, the way I want to, while I am helping other people do that for themselves. I am helping them do it for themselves by modeling how I am doing for myself. And I become the example. I become, and if we stick with the whole beachy theme for people who are still a little bit in the end of winter, it's, you know, they're following in those footprints in the stand. Like, I'm going to take the lead, and then they get to decide what that looks like for them. And it's been interesting for me, the permission theme, right? Because it is easy, but I'm also really good at it. Like, that's the other thing that I think took me a while to really own, is that there is something more powerful for the client to sit with the question for a moment, have that question answered in close to real time as possible. I mean, in reality, Katie, my clients know they might ask a question and not hear from me for 12 hours, that it doesn't always,
normal.
right? They don't always get the answer in the moment. But that was what was affecting the most change, not my 60-minute calls. For some people whose vibe doesn't sort of go with the walkie-talkie lifestyle, for people who really do want that structured 60-minute call, of course I offer it. But to give myself permission to see that people can really create transformation for themselves in a way that is easy and less rigid, like that, I actually think becomes the example. That they didn't have to wait for a 60-minute call. They got to ask a question. I answered it quickly, and they're off to the races. So that gives them permission to have it be easy, to take it seriously, because they've just gone through that process themselves.
And you also really laid into your natural advantage when you let yourself do it. And I think that's so cool, because anyone who's listened to your podcast, they're just going to be blown away, like how many light bulbs shifts you can have just so quickly. Like, some of your episodes are so short, and I come away and I'm just like, I need a pen and paper because I got to write this down. Like, I got to just like brain dump this out because I just had so many great ideas out of it. And it's like quantum leaps can happen in a really short space of time. There's nothing that says you can make change in an hour, but not 2 minutes.
Exactly. And I actually think that the moment, so the psychobabble piece in me will also say, I think the moment that we are in a decision-making place is the moment we have the question, because we're not allowing room and space for the indecisiveness, for what will other people think, what will other people do. Like, I remember talking to somebody, and she was sort of telling me about this relationship with this guy that she was dating, and I said, you know, he doesn't seem to treat you very nice. And I just, like, she made it as a side conversation, like side sort of segue to a conversation we were having. So I said, oh, it sounds like he's not very nice to you. Like, I hope you figure out a way to talk to him about that at some point, because he should be nicer. And then, like, 2 boxes later, which is like 25 to 35 minutes, she's like, you know what? I just realized, like, why is this guy getting a 3rd date from me? He's not a nice guy. You're absolutely right. I'm ending that. Like, I'm not doing this again. I canceled the weekend date. And it was like, oh, because I said it in the moment. Change can happen that fast, because the moment you have the question and the moment you have the thought is the moment you're able to pivot. And I think that so much of that is, that's the mindset in the moment gem for people right there.
I completely agree. And it's also like, you know, there's striking when the iron is hot. And I think that is something that people need to realize that is a bit of a downfall in some of the traditional launch things. It's like you're forcing people to wait. And yes, I mean, there's building tension, there's excitement, there's all that sort of stuff. But then there's also the fact that, like, somebody wants something now. Like, somebody had reached out to me about a money membership. And she's like, you know, I need to work on a bunch of stuff. Here's my next launch. I opened the wait list, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's think about it for a moment, just in this context, because money is tough. It's an emotional, stressful thing that affects every moment of our life. And when someone actually bellies up to the bar and says, you know what, I want to do something about this, and they get to your page and it's a wait list, that momentum is lost. Like, they want to deal with this now. Like, this is an extreme pain. And I mean, that is really life-changing if somebody gets their finances in order. I'm like, how about we rethink how you approach this? Because I think you could help a lot more people by not following the typical path.
And that, first of all, I think it's so brave of you to say and to give people permission to think differently about their business, because I think the traditional model is for people to think that they have to follow the steps, that they have to have the pitch perfect website, they have to have the course completely done with all the modules, and it has to look good and pretty because we're competing with the big names and the thought
right.
leaders, right? Rather than, no, you have to solve a pain point, beginning, middle, and end. And we want to do that without creating a new one. So no, we don't want a waiting list. Thank you very much. What we actually want is a welcome mat. And given where you are in your business, how do you create a welcome mat? How do you do what it is you want to do, rather than talking about what it is you want to do and planning on it, but actually getting to do the thing? And that is what has motivated me to shift and pivot. It's how I get my clients to think, and how, you know, it's a really powerful way of moving through the world if you can get out of the land of shoulds. I know what you're going to tell me, Katie. I need a landing page, and I need an email list, and I need a 3-month nurture sequence, and I need this, rather than like, I'm ready to show up, help me.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much to that. And then when you strike when the iron is hot, you just actually show up and you do the work. You can actually make real huge momentous change in somebody's life, even if that is one Voxer message at a time.
And the other thing too is this business building thing is so hard, and it challenges us, and it calls us to face so many different insecurities. And you know, all of that happens in those details of the design, of the decisions, of the launch, of the strategy, of the sequence. And sometimes what we need is just the motivation of what it feels like when we actually get to do the service to motivate us to keep on going. One of the things that helped me launch this as a signature offer and not just hide it in the corner of the, like, I don't even think I had it published. Like, I don't even think it was on my website at one point, was recognizing that I had Voxer clients on retainer while I was writing the copy for offering this service. So I was getting to do the thing, which then helps me feel like it's a worthy investment, that makes me think it's a worthy thing for people to pay attention to, because I was connected to the feeling of what it feels like to do the work. And so often people who are working with you, they're so in the weeds about all of the things that they need to do before they get to do the work. But if they just allow themselves to do that product or service and put that, you know, big shiny launch out there perfectly imperfect, that motivates them to do all of the harder pieces and make the harder decisions.
And you're totally right. When you have done it, it's so much easier to write the copy because you have the results. You know how insanely valuable this thing is. So I love that you tested it before you published anything about on your website. You got the results. You saw like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, crazy valuable. And then you wrote the copy, because I think that there's something of course you had to have an audience to do that, or you had to have at least a couple clients. But there's so many people that try and start at the top and work down, and then they find that they've written a website about something that they don't even really do.
Or they don't even like.
Yes, exactly.
Think that that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, for 2 years, these packages, you know, it's funny is I could look at my old package offerings and I could look at the ones that sold, and then I had 2 listed. I was like, you know, those things were there for 2 years and I didn't sell a single one. And I'm like, oh, right, because I kind of thought they were ridiculous. So yeah. I didn't sell them. I had them because someone else told me I needed a tier and I needed different levels of offering, and I had to do this and I had to do that. And so I quote unquote did it, but I didn't actually, because I never mentioned it. I didn't try to sell it. I didn't talk about it because I didn't believe in it.
And that is one thing that is so important. People ask like, oh, how do you sell without feeling salesy? And I'm like, when you believe in something, it's so easy to talk about it. It's like, I did a live stream about this cream that I'm just obsessed with because it's like literally changed my skin. And I'm like, I've literally messaged it to people. I've group messaged it to people. I've sent pictures of it to people because I love it. I have zero vested interest. I don't care. Like, just aside from I want them to feel the relief that I have felt. And it's so easy to sell something that you love and believe in. And if you don't love and believe your packages, then yes. Yeah, that's attention.
Can I tell you another way I look at that too? Because I think that one of the things that, I want to sell without feeling salesy. I want to sell without feeling sleazy. One of the things that, like, if we're just going to go to bare bones, one of the things that I also say to people is if you have chosen to be a business owner, it is non-negotiable that you are choosing to sell. If you don't want to sell, you don't have to be a business owner. You can simply make money online. And, one of the things I always joke about on my own show is even a monkey can make money online. We put a GoPro on a monkey's neck and throw that monkey up a tree and we get the ad revenue. So if you don't want to sell, you don't have to sell, but you can't be a business owner. So if you're choosing to be a boss and you're choosing to be a business owner, it is non-negotiable that you have to sell. You get to decide how, and you get to decide your style and the way you go about it. But the decision to sell has been made when you decide you're going to own a business. How well you sell will depend, will sort of help, will choose and decide how well your business runs and how it'll guide how successful of a business you have.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Yeah, making money and owning a business, those are not the same things. Or making money online and owning a business. Yeah, totally different. And selling comes with the territory. People expect it. If they're reaching out to you, they expect that they're going to pay for whatever thing that you are offering.
And if you don't, then they take you less seriously as a business owner and as a service provider. So I think that that's the other piece is we always focus on the natural consequence of being salesy and spammy and sleazy. And one of the things that personally annoys me sometimes is when I watch a television show, the number of times I see the same ad in a 30-minute sitcom, right? But no, whoever is paying that ad money, whoever is doing that really doesn't care that they're salesy and sleazy. They just know that, like, the more times I see their name, the more I'm going to think of them and remember them when I'm in the supermarket. They don't care whether or not I'm being annoyed or offended. So we get to decide for ourselves, like, what that means and what that looks like. And whether or not we are going to put all of this energy to how people are going to receive us and perceive us, or are we just going to stand up as we think we need to stand up and do it with less apology?
Yeah, I think that's so good. Just owning it. It's okay to own that you own owning a business.
Yes. And once you do, then the decision's been made. You have to sell. And then it becomes like, creating a conversation with yourself about, okay, I've made this decision to own a business. I have this product and service that I really, truly believe in. What do I need to do differently to make talking about it feel easier for me? And one of the things that I always hear in my own business is people who hate live video and they can't stand live video. And I'm constantly saying, like, well, then you don't have to go on live video.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you have to sell your product. Yes, you need to let people know about it, but no, you don't have to do it live. You can do it through a blog. You can do it through, like I do with the daily podcast. You can do it in whatever way gels with your style. You just have to do it.
Exactly. You don't have to do, again, it's like you don't have to do the exact same thing that everybody's telling you to do. You can find the way that works for you. I mean, there's so many people that I find that come up to me and say, like, oh, I can't blog. And I'm like, you don't have to blog. Gosh, there's so many ways to create content now, and it is so easy. It's great that we live in this world where there's just so many things we can do. And I have to thank you for making my podcast possible, because I was looking at the old traditional way of doing podcasting, which is a lot of work. And then when I found Anchor and it makes it so doable for me, I was like, oh my goodness, this made it possible. And I mean, 2-3 years ago, that wouldn't have been a reality.
Katie, when I started, people were telling me I wasn't a real podcast. I had to get over that hump of, like you said just now with it, is it okay if it's easy? Because everyone was like doing all of the things. They were recording their audio, then they were uploading their audio, and they were using Audacity to edit, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and they're adding the show notes and they're uploading this. And I was like, I just get on my phone, I hold it to my ear, I talk, and then I hit stop. And I'm getting listeners and people care about this. And I still, even though I knew it was good and I was proud of the product, the first year I did it, the show is now, I think the show is almost finishing its second year. I've lost track of when I started, but like for the first year, people are like, oh, you're not a real podcast, or when are you going to move off Anchor? And it was, you know what? Actually, I'm not going to, because I've recorded a podcast when we moved cross country. I was in 2 different hotels. I had to do it from, like I was doing it from like a car, like at different points in time when I couldn't get the audio right. Like it just allowed me to get my message out there in a way that fit my life at the time, because I wasn't technically homeless, but I hadn't purchased my home yet. Yeah. So I was living in a hotel and I could still run the podcast. At the same time, people were telling me it wasn't real. I get to define that. And that's, I think, the challenge for listeners is to recognize that what, you know, you and I are talking about today is if we're really going to get them to forge their own path and really get them to realize they get to build a business the way they want to with products and services they want to, is it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it's not supposed to be.
Thank goodness.
It's supposed to be exactly the people who need to find you.
Like how many people keep telling me to drink green tea, and I'm like, I would love to, but you know what? It makes my stomach hurt. I can't drink green tea. Stop it.
Right.
Stop
that doesn't mean I'm not healthy. Exactly. Yes. Permission.
Being okay with just not, and you know what? Sometimes you offend people. Sometimes I probably say things out of passion and out of love that come across the wrong way, just because I believe in something so much. And it's like, I want to help, but you know, someone may be expecting the cozy coach where all you do is ask questions, where I'm like, you know what, like, let's dig into this. I'm more of I don't really consider myself a coach. I consider myself a consultant, which is like, if you want to know how to do it, I will tell you how to do it. I'm not going to sit there and be like, it's okay that you don't want to, like, you know, I'll give you different options. Pick the one that's right for you. We're going to get you results. But sometimes you had to do the hard thing in order to get the results.
And I think that knowing we're capable of hard is such a part of the battle. I think one of the things we battle in our respective businesses is the idea that the barrier of entry for business ownership has never been lower or easier for people. So when I had my brick and mortar, the idea that selling was something that I could afford time on thinking about was absurd, because I had to pay rent. My business came with monthly overhead that wasn't just the cost of like my mailing list.
It's more than like $15 a month.
$15 a month, right? I had to show up for myself because bills were due. And I think sometimes when the barrier of entry is so low and we don't have the overhead, we allow all of this time and space and room for our feelings. You know, I grew up, Katie, I don't know if you know this about me, but my dad owned a Subway franchise growing up.
Yes, I did hear that.
So I worked for him probably from before it was legal for me to work for him, right?
I did that too with my parents.
Right through college. And he never was like, oh, you know, I don't know if people want to hear about this 6 foot, 6 foot offer at Super Bowl. Maybe they're just going to want to do their own thing. He didn't sit in the doubt of I don't know if my 6 foot sub is going to be something people really want for their Super Bowl party. He let everybody know at Super Bowl time, 6 foot sub, feeds 25 people, and he let everybody know unapologetically.
I love it.
Business owner. And that's what business owners do. And I think sometimes, when it's so low, the barrier of entry is so low, we have all this time to go, do people really want a 6-month premium offer? Is that really what they want? Or maybe they want an event, or maybe they want this. And we give ourselves permission to sit in crazy amounts of indecisiveness when business owners, we really don't have that kind of time.
No, you don't. If you're a hobbyist and you want to, you don't want to make money, okay, that's up to you. But when, you know what, you still got to feed your family. You may not have to pay rent at, your office, but you still have to pay rent and mortgage at the place that you work, like your house.
Yes. And I think it's hard for people sometimes because it means feeling whatever discomfort they have about what they're doing, but doing it anyway. And that ultimately is, you know, I think the mindset challenge is pairing your self-belief and your self-awareness with strategy that you can feel good about, that feels aligned with you, is how you make movement, how you create growth, how you change your ROI is by changing the story. And it starts with that piece of like, I am going to own a business, and while I'm at it, if I'm going to do the hard work, I might as well choose to be successful at it, and I might as well choose to sell with all I've got.
Because you're going to be working anyway. You're going to be doing so many things, and you may as well just do the ones that actually move the needle.
Yes, and make the money.
I recently had this epiphany myself where I was like, you know what so much of coaching is selling somebody on themselves. Like
Yes.
they know they want it, they know they can do it, but it's like they just need that extra push. And when you're sort of like, you know, show them just why they can do it and how they can do it, it's like, oh, you're right.
And proving, you know, so many times, I'm sure you and I deal in the same language. I don't know how many of your clients go, well, what if, what if, what if? That's always what trips up my people. And what I always say is, let's answer the question. So what if you do this and people don't like it? What if you do it and it's too polarizing? What if you make this decision and you lose money? Like, are you going to die? Like, are you capable? And what I always tune people into is, how capable are you of the repair, of fixing it, of readjusting? And just because we don't want to fail, just because we don't want to have to be pulling ourselves up off the ground again from a fit of despair, doesn't mean we're not capable. And once we can tune into our capability that we've been here before, we don't want to be here again. But if we have to be, we can do it. I think it makes taking those risks and testing and trying new things so much easier, rather than where I imagine a lot of your folks are, where they're so stuck in indecisiveness because they don't know what's going to sell, rather than being willing to say, I'm willing to try this, and if it doesn't sell, I will try something else.
Yeah, exactly. And not creating the story around it of, if this isn't exactly what they want, that it's like, well, I'm closing up shop. It's like, I kind of want to start changing the language, but instead of like launch, like just change it to offer. Like, I offered this. Oh, you know what? People didn't respond to that, but they told me they wanted that instead. Oh, well, now I have a new offer.
Yes. Because launch, immediately we associate that with rocket. And it's supposed to go really fast, really high, with like relative ease, like just the press of a button, rather than like, well, no, that's not actually how it works. Like, we can do a soft open, we can do like a lead in, we can create a new way of introducing people to ourselves and what we do and how we serve. But it's so, you're speaking dangerous talk there, Miss Katie, because it goes against what so many of the sort of thought leaders and online business people in the space are saying, where like there's entire courses and memberships and sort of, you know, segments of business ownership that are all about the perfect launch, rather than sort of saying like, maybe we just put it out there and see what happens next, and maybe that can be perfectly imperfect. It's, you know, you're challenging the status quo yourself there, I think.
Oh yeah, I definitely am. And you know what? It feels good, even though it feels a little scary. And going back to the actual rocket analogy, one thing that I keep thinking is like, you know what? Once a rocket is launched, it's only going that one direction. It only has that one trajectory. Whereas if you do what we're talking about and actually being flexible and trying things out, seeing what works, you know, leaning into things and listening to people and getting that feedback, you don't have to stay on that trajectory. You can move, you can change based on your new information that you're getting.
And, you know, so much of that is, you know, what defines entrepreneurship, right? So much of that is like, I'm perceiving a problem. I'm imagining it's a pain point. Let me just be curious about it. Let me explore what happens. What's the result I get when I do A, and what's the result I get when I do B, and what looks and feels the best. And rather than, and one of the things I try to change in my own language is when people talk about it being really scary and taking a risk, What happens if we're just curious? What
Yeah.
happens if we're like, let's go back to wonder? Because when we were kids, like sitting in the land of wonder was amazing. So if we wonder what would happen and how people might think and respond, we are less restricted, we're less tight, we're holding ourselves less rigidly, and we can create something new and innovative to solve a problem or a pain point, rather than keeping us like sort of forced in a box. Because if we're curious and it leads nowhere, then we don't do anything with it. But if we're curious and all of these people are clamoring and following and interested in talking and asking questions about it, then we know we're kind of onto something, and it gives us permission to be more curious. Again, just to find out what keeps happening and to recognize that we are capable of then reining it in and getting control of it and choosing what's the strategy, what do I need to implement, what are the steps. But so often we cut off the wonder and the curiosity, which I ultimately think is part of the reason why we hold ourselves back and play so small sometimes.
And I think some of that is fear. Like when you feel like you have the proven path and you're like, oh, everybody's done it this way, so therefore I must do it that way. Then, you just keep going, following that path and getting more off course from what you need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just, following that curiosity and going, what about if I go a little left of center? How about that? How does that feel?
And how do I feel doing it? Part of when everybody else tells you how to run your business and you follow all those steps and you do all those things, you might actually make money and you might actually be successful. But Katie, one of the most popular offerings I had back when I was doing packages was the pivot package, because people were burning down their businesses because they created their first, bout of success. They had made themselves significant revenue. They had created the following. They had people liking them, and they wanted to burn their businesses down because they were so unhappy. They built something that they didn't like doing.
Yes.
That's
Oh
a
my
real
gosh.
risk.
The pivot, I love the name, the pivot package. And that just like, that totally got my head, because everyone's like, oh, you pivot. And I'm like, yeah, I pivot all the time. And I love it because I'm always like, oh, people have responded to this. I see that there's an opportunity there. And a few minutes ago, you were saying how like change is part of being a business owner. And it's true. I mean, we have all these sayings like, starting a business is jumping off the cliff and building the parachute on the way down and stuff like that. But meanwhile, we stick ourselves into these rigid boxes and we're like, we have to do everything this way. And it's like completely counterintuitive to what.
And I think some of the messaging around failure and quitting is actually kind of to blame for some of that we have created this idea that if we have started offering this signature course and nobody buys, that we have failed. Or if we offer this and it doesn't work and we don't try again, we're quitting. And those are looked at as so negatively, and they are looked at as so, like a step back or a bad mindset, rather than recognizing I am identifying something that doesn't work or doesn't make sense or didn't actually solve the problem. I am going to give myself permission to just do something else. I have a business that I did. You probably don't know about this, but I had a business that I did back in, I think it was 2013. I built a parent coaching business back when I had my brick and mortar.
I just on the podcast.
Yeah, I decided.
How I catch up with you.
Yeah, I decided I was going to help parents with their hard to understand kids, because I started my career as a kid expert. And I was like, I just need to do something fee for service. I need to make more money than the insurance payments are paying. So I'm just going to do this thing. So I got the website designed. I got all the little flyers and the pamphlets. And I went to the doctors and I told the doctors I was doing this. And I told the school principals and the guidance counselors. But at the end of the day, I never talked to anybody else, like parents. And said, hey, you have a problem understanding your kid. And what I ultimately learned is that a lot of parents don't want to talk to somebody who's not themselves a parent about their kid problems. So even though I had all this training, even though I had all this expertise, I built a business that nobody wanted. Because I thought the first step to business building was you decide your brand name and then you get a website and you do all the steps, rather than maybe I try to meet a parent and say, hey, I hear you're having a hard time with your kid. Would you like my help?
And it's so easy when you say it that way. You're like, oh, right, that would make sense.
Right, but I built a business that made $0, right?
Yeah,
That's the other part of the story. And so,
but it
and
looks great, Heather. That
right?
website is gorgeous.
And then when people are like, oh, so you quit on that idea as soon as it got hard? I'm like, no, I didn't quit on that idea. I realized I made a series of really bad decisions. And I'm just going to go and undo those really bad decisions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. You always look for the lessons. And especially when people are like, my launch flopped, my launch flopped. I'm like, no, no, there's something to be learned here. Like, let's just take a step back. Like, I know it's okay to like be caught up in the moment and emotionally it's awful, but like you can have those moments. But like when you push that aside and you're willing to look at it, my goodness, there's so many good golden lessons in there that you need to learn. And unless you learn the lesson, you're going to keep, unless you learn what you need to understand, you're going to keep getting the lesson over and over again.
So I have a question for you about that. Do you
Yeah.
think that part of the reason why that happens for people, my launch flopped, is that one of the things that so many people are told is this is the money I'd like to make. This is the money I'd be good with. And this is my big, hairy, scary money goal. Do you think that part of where we get that flop mentality and that we should have made more and that should have been a bigger return is because the entrepreneur space in some way has like puffed up this imagery of 10xing and 5xing, and it's created that like idea that that's what good enough is or that's what success is?
I definitely think so. It's like there's push to just automate everything, scale, more, this, that. And it's like the people who you were helping suddenly become numbers. And I think that's when the disconnect happens, when you stop feeling like I'm serving all these people and like, 20 people trusted me in order to do this thing and to serve them and to take them to the next level and all that sort of stuff, instead of being like, well, I didn't make $1 million.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
it's a huge disconnect, and you probably see that as well. Whereas sometimes when you're able to experience the gratitude and be grateful for the people that you do get to serve, and when you take that step back, like I was saying, and really seeing why other people didn't join, that's when you find clarity. Maybe your messaging was off. Maybe you attracted the wrong people in the first place, but you couldn't see that in the moment.
And I think one of the things the reason why I asked is I think one of the things that I have to learn in my own messaging and in my own conversations with people is that there is value in slow. And there is value in just taking our time and finding our pace. And that slow is not the same thing as inaction. Slow is not the same thing as avoidance. Slow can be intentional and slow can be deliberate with our eye on like the long game, and that this is a marathon, not a race.
Yes.
Because the other thing I see in a lot of these launches and that fancy mumbo jumbo language that people use is they run out of gas. So
Oh
they
my gosh, yes.
they do all of the things all at once, and then they don't have the energy to be curious about the testing, to be curious about the metrics, to get into the nitty gritty of, the numbers. It's like, oh, well, I did all that. I showed up live 6 days in a row, and I did this last minute Q&A, and I sent this 17 email sequence out, and I did all this. So now I can't even look and be bothered to find out why only 20 bought when I was expecting 25% conversion. Like people have like given it all at the beginning, and they don't have gas left in the tank for the curiosity.
Oh, that is exactly it. And because especially if you're building a course or something, you put so much time, effort, money, soul, coffee, cups of coffee, so much coffee into building the course. And then you're like, now I have to launch it? Are you kidding me? And yeah, that is a huge thing. Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I can't believe how fast this time had gone. Like, I'm just like looking at the clock and I'm like, I could just keep talking to you forever. I have a question from an amazing listener who's also a great podcaster herself, Shelly Varela. And I think that this is a great way to end the podcast because it really kind of touches on everything that we covered, talking about flops, talking about all sorts of stuff. So her question is, how do you typically reframe a bad day?
Oh, I love this question. I
Isn't
love
that
that you said
good?
the person who wrote in is Shelley, you said?
Shelley, yeah,
Shelly,
she's
hi,
incredible.
Shelly. Thanks for your question. So, here's the thing. I think that there's a couple of things. One is I think we have to all recognize and sort of what I call get with the people a little bit and recognize that bad days are going to happen. That we don't have to give a ton of energy to a bad day. But the way bad days tend to start is you realize you got up 10 minutes too late and the water in the shower was cold when it should have been hot and the coffee spilled so you didn't get your full cup of coffee. And you start to think about all of the things that went wrong. And then you're scanning and you find even more things that went wrong. And you find, and then this happened. And then it was really loud when I was trying to podcast. And then it was this, and then it was that. That one of the ways to sort of flip the script on a bad day is to give yourself permission to press pause and to reset. Sometimes that means you're just going to be in suck it up mode. Like, I'm having a bad day. Not every day is bad. Tomorrow will probably be better. It can't get worse. And like, so what do I need to do? And then just get on going with it. But then the other thing to do is to start scanning for good, to say, well, it didn't all go bad. So what did go your way? What did work? Where did you try your best and your best actually happened? And then where did you, in that, if you really can't see anything that actually happened, tune into your capability and your skill set for all of the problems you solved, all of the fires you put out, all of the ways that you managed through the day to that point to be still standing, so that you're taking care of yourself. And you're using that as a moment to kind of pat yourself on the back that you don't want a bad day to happen, but you're capable of managing a bad day when it happens. And then the next thing I sort of rounded out with, set the intention for what you're going to do to try to make it end better. Like, create something you're going to look forward to. So I remember in my therapy days, my least favorite activity was fighting with insurance companies. And if I had a really bad fight, that was always when it was a really bad day. So I had a playlist that I could only play of my like really hating on loud, anger-filled songs, and I could only play those songs when I had had a fight with the insurance company. So then that day was, I created a ritual of something I could look forward to, is once I'm in this car, once I'm done my day, I get to sing out loud to the radio and, you know, be in my own time and space and create that ritual for myself. I think that there's a lot of ways people can get control of a bad day and rewrite the ending.
I love that. So take a pause, set an intention of what you can do in order to make it better, have a good gratitude rash where you go and take account of all the awesome things that are in your life, all the cool things that you do, you're great at, all that sort of good stuff. I love all of these tips. That is amazing.
And then tune into capability.
Tune into capability. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, thank you so much, Heather. This has been such an amazing conversation, and I feel like I need to have you back because this is so good and we could just keep going and going and going.
I would love it. I would love it. Thank you so much for having me. I think you're offering tremendous value to your peeps, and I'm so glad to be a part of the conversation.
And I know I've mentioned your podcast a few times already, but where can people find you?
Yes. So people definitely can find me on my daily podcast. It's Business Mindset Mastery, and you should be able to find it wherever you listen to your podcast. And then you can also check out what I'm doing and what I'm about over at heathergrayconsulting.com. And there's links all over the website to, book a call with me and chat about how I might be able to help you. If you're finding yourself stuck in the weeds, I can help you get out pretty quick.
And it's true. I've been there, and she has, and she's just an absolute mindset miracle worker. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Heather Gray, and I know that this is just going to be the first that you've spent time with her, and the start of many more, podcast episodes and maybe Voxer calls in your future.